Yeah, sure thing.
Hey, you sold that car yet?
Yeah, sold it to Carvana.
Oh, I thought you were selling to that guy.
The guy who wanted to pay me in foreign currency, no interest, over 36 months? Yeah, no. Carvana gave me an offer in minutes, picked it up, and paid me on the spot. It was so convenient.
Just like that.
Yep.
No hassle.
None.
That is super convenient.
Sell your car to Carvana and swap hassle for convenience. Pickup fees may apply.
If your football team had one option in their playbook, the results probably wouldn't be great. The same could be said for your investments. SIBO index options like SPX and XSP can help expand your investing strategies with cash settlement and potential tax advantages. If you're ready for a more dynamic game plan, head to betterwithoptions.com. SIBO, life is better with options. Your investments could be too. There are risks associated with SIBO company products. Review the disclosures and disclaimers at SIBO.com/US_disclaimers.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/SBO. Terms and conditions apply.
Build a routine with Ollie that supports your wellness needs, like getting your daily vitamins and minerals with Ollie's multi-gummies, or keeping your mood upbeat with all the vitamin D in Hello Happy. Give your gut health some support with probiotics, and wake up feeling refreshed after taking Ollie Sleep. Do wellness on your terms. Find Ollie at a Walmart or Target near you, or at ollie.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
I mean, what a moment. Kevin Durant in the locker room celebrating with his childhood team, Washington Commanders.
What you got to say, though? What's your buff song?
Such a cool thing to see is Kevin Durant. You know, he's been through a lot in his NBA career, won a championship with the Warriors, multiple championships. I feel like he's kind of this unhappy fella, a guy that people troll that he's too sensitive and all this. But to see him in the Commanders locker room after putting a beat down on the Lions, this is awesome to see. This is so cool, man.
No, Tom. Thomas. You are so blinded by whatever smokescreen they throw in front of you. You're so blinded, you don't even see a smokescreen.
I saw cigar smoke, I think it was, in the locker room, like celebrating.
You see a Bugs Bunny cartoon of a pie on a windowsill, the little fumes coming out and grabbing you by the nose, and you're there. Except instead of a pie, it's a football.
Oh, is it like that football from Christmas Day that was actually a cake?
Yes.
Because it was Netflix?
Exactly. You cut it open, is it cake? It's a football cake. You know why, Tom? It's because you don't even know it's happened. It's already happened. It's not happening. I would tell you to keep your third eye open, but it's too late. It's already happened.
It's too late. We can't do that this time. Put your buffs on, Tom.
What do you mean? I don't even know what that means.
It's a Detroit thing.
Your third eye is closed, so put your buffs on.
Because this is where we're at. Football has successfully annexed everything. They took Christmas, and they took KD, and now they've taken over this podcast.
That's right. Keep your third eye open is dead.
Well,
put your buffs on is the new slogan of this podcast.
Your third eye is still open. It's just we're looking at something different now.
Wait, the Suns, surely KD was in like Chicago.
No.
And then made the trip to Detroit for this game, right?
They played the Pistons. It was a day game. And just by happenstance, random coincidence.
There are no mistakes, no coincidences.
The Lions would be hosting an NFL playoff game against the Washington Commanders. Yeah, that all happened on the same day.
It's a conspiracy.
Wait a minute. So the Suns, how many times do they go to Detroit every year?
Once a year.
And it just so
You're looking at this wrong, Tom. You're looking at it as, did the NBA, the basketball Illuminati guys do that? No, the NBA was just doing its regular thing. Let's have games on Christmas. We do this every year. Like, yeah, cool, do your thing. Hey, let's have the Suns play at Detroit on Saturday, January 18th. We made this months ago. What was the thing that changed? What was the thing that happened last minute? Oh, the Washington Commanders are going to win a playoff game and get to go where? To play who? That's right. There were Illuminati gods. You do keep your third eye open, but they're not basketball Illuminati gods. They're football Illuminati gods. And guess what? They've taken over this podcast too. Hit the music. It's football Illuminati.
My assignment. Uncover why the association inspires more conspiracy theories in volume and salience than any other U.S. sport.
So you've heard of the Illuminati.
The truth is out there, but so are lies.
Your eyes can deceive you. Don't trust them.
The NBA has always been controlled by about 8 people.
Denial is the most predictable of all human responses.
If you're only using 10% of your brain, you don't even know that you're using 10% of your brain.
The NBA Illuminati.
If coincidences are just coincidences, why do they feel so contrived?
The Illuminati.
But you start to follow the money, and you don't know where the f*** it's going to take you.
It is unspoken. They have influence among other players.
The NBA Illuminati.
I don't have time for your convenient ignorance.
Maybe I'm a conspiracist now as well.
That's all it took. Oh, we got books, we got schools. You saw a video on YouTube.
Why am I eyes, sir? You've never used them before.
We are the basketball Illuminati.
This is Basketball Illuminati.
No,
I am Tom Haberstroh.
No, it's not. It's Football Illuminati.
It's Football Illuminati, formerly Basketball Illuminati. I am your producer. I'm not even I don't even know who I am anymore.
You've shaken him to the core. Put your buffs on, Tom. Try it again.
This is Football Illuminati. I am Tom Haberstroh, and as always, I am joined by the 5-star Illuminati generals of the football field, Amin Elhassan and super producer Anthony Mays.
We call it the gridiron.
Keep your third gridiron open. I'm still trying to figure this out.
There's nothing to figure out here, Tom. You're confused for no reason.
Okay.
It's Football Illuminati. We've got a great show for you guys today. We've got, as a truth teller, Halen Kaler, who wrote an amazing story about how the NFL is withering under the influence of coaching and front office agents dictating, orchestrating, pulling strings behind the scenes of who gets hired where. You don't want to miss this conversation. It is fascinating. But first,
you are listening to The Agenda with Amin Elhassan and Tom Haberstroh.
Wait a minute. I'm seeing things a little bit more clearly. I woke up this morning thinking I was going to write this thing on the New York Knicks and how they're teetering on the precipice of being overplayed by Tom Thibodeau, 688 minutes played by that starting 5, by far the most in the NBA. And then there's this little bug in my ear that was like, Tom, you should write about the NFL.
Yes.
You should write about Lamar Jackson.
Yes.
And I'm sitting here thinking, wait a minute. This is my free will saying it would be fun to think about who is the Lamar Jackson of the NFL. And you're telling me that I am a mere puppet for the gridiron overlords, that's the reason why I wrote that article today?
The annexation has begun and commenced and perhaps even completed. This is a football podcast. We're doing football stories. Guess what? Lamar Jackson got eliminated this weekend. Great game between the Bills and the Ravens. You got to make that 2-point conversion. But it raises a new chorus of criticisms for Lamar Jackson, a multi-time MVP winner who Forget about never won the big game, never played for the big game. And I am curious, and as I understand you already satisfied this curiosity, by who the NBA comp would be to Lamar Jackson. Who is the guy in the league who has the same type of resume and the same postseason failure that Lamar Jackson has?
I realize this is just a part of the marketing tool. If there aren't NBA fans already watching the NFL, why don't we make this cross-reference of who is the Lamar Jackson of the NBA, where everyone on Twitter, X, they're laughing at Lamar Jackson, calling him the James Harden of the NBA. And Maze, do you think that James Harden fits as the Lamar Jackson? Because I kind of feel like James Harden going against the Warriors all these years, couldn't get over the hump, faced Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, almost beat them, but the last minute injury to Chris Paul, his hamstring gives out, and then suddenly kicked to the curb again. The comparison is that James Harden, great regular season player, but a postseason choker.
The James Harden comparison is disrespectful, Tom.
Everybody's making it. Everyone, they're laughing at him.
It's to troll Lamar Jackson. It's to kick him while he's down, to call him the James Harden of the NFL. It's not about accuracy. It's about disrespect. People love to rip Lamar Jackson. Last year, caught a ton of heat when the team went down to the Chiefs in the AFC title game. This year, he had some early mistakes, but then he did enough to win, and it was somebody else's fault. Mark Andrews fumbled it, dropped the 2-point conversion. But in a couple months, are we going to be crapping on Mark Andrews still, or is the narrative going to be that Lamar Jackson still has not done it in the playoffs?
Couldn't win the big one.
We know what Stu Gatz would say.
Yep.
So here's what I did. Looked up guys for their first 7 years in the league, in the NBA, multiple MVPs. I don't think it's fair to put James Harden on the same tier as Lamar Jackson, who might be on his way to his third MVP, right, Maze?
He might be, yeah.
He's up there.
It will look pretty silly if Josh Allen loses, but beat him in the playoffs.
Then you put in the fact that he has not made it to the Super Bowl yet in his first 7 seasons in the league. He's gotten to the conference championship once in his 7-year NFL career, and his record in the postseason is 3-5. So I wanted to see which player in NBA history has had multiple MVPs, 0 championships, 0 championship appearances, and has a losing record in the postseason. And the list is not very long. In fact, the list, as I have discovered, is only one name long. And I hadn't seen anyone type this name on social media as the Lamar Jackson cop. Not a single person had said Lamar Jackson is the blank of the NFL. But you'd see thousands of them for James Harden. And the answer is...
drum roll.
Giannis Antetokounmpo.
One name long, one long name.
Think about it. Remember, this takes them to the 2020 bubble season.
Right.
First 7 seasons in the league. 2 MVPs, 5 postseasons, 4 All-Stars, a conference finals appearance, which was the year before the bubble, against the Toronto Raptors. 0 finals appearances, 0 titles, and he went 3-5 in playoff series, which is exactly the same record as Lamar Jackson on this Monday morning as we're recording.
Now, Tom, here's a question for you. When you talk about Giannis and Lamar Jackson has very high-profile playoff failures, right? He was expected to win. Can we say the same about Giannis Antetokounmpo?
Oh, yeah. Top seed in the Eastern Conference back-to-back years and then didn't make the finals in any of those years. He goes up 2-0 against the Toronto Raptors and then loses 4 straight and gets destroyed by Kawhi Leonard in that final game 6, shot under 40%. And then against the Miami Heat in the bubble, yes, he got hurt, turned his ankle in game 3, but they were already down in that series 2-0. They go down 0-3 against the Miami Heat. And then he comes back for game 4, aggravates his ankle again, misses game 5. And yet another season of another disappointment from Giannis Antetokounmpo, who won back-to-back MVPs and never reached the finals.
I like it. I like this comp.
I can't argue with it.
Why do you think there's no comparison here? Why do you guys think that people are quick to blame?
Because it's not sexy, Tom. James Harden, the beard. It's a more recognizable brand. It's a more recognizable brand with losing.
The other thing, Tom, you got to remember is people fail to contextualize information, right? The information, when we're trying to search for a comp, we're not looking for someone whose entire career mirrors the first 7 years of Lamar Jackson's. It's just the first 7 years of their career mirrors the first 7 years of Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson might rip off 3 Super Bowl MVPs, 3 Super Bowls in a row, starting from now for next year. But we don't know that yet because it hasn't happened. So it's not fair to compare an entirety of a James Harden career who is now in year what? 16?
Yeah.
So he's got 16 years that we're comparing against 7 versus Giannis Antetokounmpo. People won't compare it, not because those first 7 years aren't similar, but because we know what happened after that, is that he won a championship. And if it's one thing that I've learned from people, is that once you win, we immediately erase everything we said about you before that. It's called the Dirk prophecy.
Yeah.
Dirk was soft. Dirk will never win one. Dirk doesn't have it. Dirk is European, and you can't win with a European as your best player. Dirk this, Dirk that. Dirk wins a championship, and instantly it's like, of course, he's the greatest big man shooter of all time. Of course, how could they not win? He's such a tough scorer. Hey, you know what? That little lean back thing where his leg is up, I want to learn how to shoot that. Now Kevin Durant shoot, everyone around the league is, and instantly we stopped talking about Dirk in that way. And the same thing happened to Giannis. He had all of these criticisms about him. He wins one, and instantly the criticisms are all gone.
There's another connection that I like as well, Tom, which is they slipped in the draft. Giannis, not quite as far as Lamar Jackson, who fell all the way to the end of the first round, and they fell for different reasons. But both of them were underestimated coming into the league.
Both of them very thin coming into the league. People wondered about their durability to play the sport with the physicality. Both of them insane, elite level athletes.
Small difference. Lamar Jackson already knew what a corn dog was.
Right.
Good point. And Culver's.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another similarity. Even after they figured things out, even after their body got better, even after they started playing and winning, both of them have been criticized for their styles of play. He's not really a quarterback. He's not really a basketball player. They're both just athletes who are somehow surviving out here and thriving without knowing, quote unquote, how to play the sport. You know who led the chorus of criticisms against Giannis on that very point?
Was it Nick Wright?
James Harden.
Oh.
James Harden.
I wish I could just run and with 7 feet and run and just dunk. Like, that takes no skill at all. I got to actually learn how to play basketball and how to have skill, you know?
Because I was going in a different direction here. I was thinking this would be a Nick Wright expose. Nick Wright was destroying Nikola Jokic before he won his NBA title, painted him as an all-time fraud and all this. And he has been doing similar things with Lamar Jackson, as he is the anti-Lamar, I guess, by caping for Patrick Mahomes and taking that side of the argument. By virtue of doing that, he's a truther on Lamar Jackson in the same way that I think he portrayed himself as a truther on Jokic is overrated. He's just a stat stuffer, loved by analytics folks who, if we had a truth serum, would never put Jokic among the all-time greats. And yet he wins a title and we forget about all that. I felt like we were going in the direction of Lamar Jackson is the Jokic of the NFL.
The Nikola Jokic comp works because before Derrick Henry, who was Lamar Jackson's best offensive teammate? Mark Andrews, who completely blew the game on Sunday.
Yeah.
But look at that receiving core. They didn't have Zay Flowers this weekend. That's a non-Pro Bowl, non-All-Pro receiving core. Much like everyone says Nikola Jokic doesn't get any help. That's why he's farming MVPs.
When you brought up Nick Wright, I thought you were building up to the point where Nick Wright will steal this take in a couple of weeks or something. That's how I thought you were going with it.
No.
Nick is about to celebrate a Kansas City Chiefs three-peat. I think he'll be a little preoccupied with that.
Good point.
Fair. So I think Giannis is the comp, and I don't think that's going to go viral. I don't think people are going to use it because it's too nuanced, you know? It's just too nuanced. People like things this or the other. Did I say nuanced?
You said it's too nuanced. It's nuanced.
Hey, Chris Cody, here I am.
Nuanced.
I think when you look at why people aren't making that comp, it's because Giannis is in the middle. We like to think of things as binary. You either win the big one or you don't. And somewhere Giannis is not quite the Peyton Manning where he went on to win multiple Super Bowls and becomes America's favorite hero. No, there's only Peyton Mannings of the world and James Hardens of the world. And Giannis is somewhere in the middle. So I feel now that I've been duped. That this whole time I'm thinking that I had this agency in my head, that I had free will, and yet apparently I'm just a puppet of the NFL. And speaking of agencies
and puppets,
we've got a wonderful guest here coming up, a truth teller of truth tellers.
Yeah.
We are doing an NFL truth teller segment with Kalen Kaler. of ESPN.com. I can't wait to talk to her about this expose on the way things actually operate in the NFL.
Playoffs? We're talking about playoffs? You bet we are. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Scoring touchdowns is key to winning in the playoffs, and you can score big by betting on them at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Tutties. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a Josh Allen touchdown or the best connection in the NFL, Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase. Pay attention, though, because lines and odds are subject to change. New DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code CTD. That's code CTD for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
Flex your business with an American Express Business Gold Card. You'll earn 4 times membership rewards points on your top 2 eligible spending categories, like transit and electronics, each month, on up to $150K in combined purchases per year. Plus, you can now earn 3 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold, built for business by American Express.
You all think I'm late. Well, I'm not late. And I'm going to stay right here and fight for this lost cause, even if this room gets filled with lies like these. And the Taylors and all their armies come marching into this place. Somebody will listen to me.
There's no better way to overpower a trickle of doubt than with a flood of naked truth.
But the complexity and the gray lie not in the truth, but what you do with the truth once you have it.
What is true and right is true and right for all.
You and I both know that that's just not the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
Too messy. Keeps them up nights.
I'm here because in the end, the truth is worth the risk.
Speak a little truth and people lose their minds.
I'm a grown man, you can tell me the truth.
Why is it people who want the truth never believe it when they hear it?
So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do something really outrageous. I'm going to tell the truth.
All right, we have the NBA's greatest superfan on the show right now. Kayla Kaler from ESPN.com. She covers the NFL for ESPN, formerly of Sports Illustrated and The Athletic. She's an investigative reporter, not just covering the players and the teams and the games, but above, I think, all else, she's peeling back the curtain on how these entities, these institutions operate behind the scenes in ways that I don't think many people are doing. So kudos to you, Kaylin. Thanks for doing that.
Thanks, guys. The joke was that I don't know anything about the NBA. So for those listening, I am furthest from a super fan. I can't even tell you the last NBA game that I watched. Although I live in Chicago and sometimes I will go to a Bulls game for fun.
That's why. Now it all makes sense.
The last, no, this isn't true. I went a couple years ago, but I'll never forget the day that COVID became a pandemic. I was at a Bulls game and I was like, oh, no one's here.
That's the moment it became a pandemic. It didn't exist before then until the NBA announced that it was happening.
Right. Yeah. The NBA for me defined COVID in a lot of ways. So
thank you.
We were joking earlier, Kaylin, that the NFL has, I don't even know if I'm joking anymore.
No, it's real.
That the NFL has completely co-opted and taken over the NBA by taking Christmas Day and basically saying hey, that's cute. The NBA has Christmas Day. All right. That block is now ours.
Well, I was just doing another radio hit about this story last week. And, one of the things that came up was that NFL owners, there's really nothing they can do to, even if they keep hiring the wrong coach and they have to keep firing the coach and keep hiring a new coach, there's really nothing they can do to decrease the value of their franchise unless they're Dan Snyder and they're, harassing women who work for the organization. But it's there's really nothing you can do wrong. I mean, the case of the Bears, this story that we're going to talk about is about how NFL coaching agents sort of run the whole business. And the centerpiece of the story is the Chicago Bears, because they have had the same coaching agent represent the last two head coaches, the current general manager who hired the most recent head coach who was fired, and then an offensive coordinator on that previous head coach's staff, and then the two most recent offensive coordinators who were also both fired before the head coach was fired who hired them. So there's like a pattern of representation with one specific agent, and he is a former Bears player. So that's why it's even more of a question, more questions to be asked, because he was drafted by the Bears in 1989 in the first round. Anyways, but the Bears have become, the Bears are the centerpiece of this story because they just haven't had any success with the people that they've hired who are represented by the same agent. And, it doesn't matter though. Like if the McCaskies were to sell the team tomorrow, it'd probably be valued at, I think the Cowboys are valued right now at 10 billion. So I would put the Bears like right behind that. Like they're probably, I don't know what their actual most, reported valuation would be, but they're probably like worth 7 to 8 billion, I would think. So doesn't really matter that they haven't won a Super Bowl since 1985.
It's an amazing story. It's called How Agents Impact Coaching Searches and Why the NFL Cares. I was struck by how, Kaylin, that Roger Goodell wants to it appears that he wants to break this model, is that he's setting up some sort of consortium where it's like, we're going to do this study on how coaches and GMs are being hired and the demographics of such and how they're aligned. And it seems like they are trying to break this kind of wall. And I don't really remember, in the NBA side, I think it's even more concentrated by one agency, one particular agency, and that you don't have as many that are running the coaching and front office side in the NBA. But I never really thought Adam Silver should step in and break this up in ways that Roger Goodell seems to be taking it upon himself to be like, hey, we need to actually study this and figure out a way out of this.
And Kaylin, so on that note, my question is, what was the impetus for the league to start looking into that side? Was it the owners who were complaining? Was it the league front office and Roger Goodell's office that noticed it? Who was the stimulus that started this process of investigation?
So I don't know if there was a specific person or entity complaining that was the stimulus, but I would say for several years, or at least the league did not tell me if there was. That was something that they were a little bit vague about. And so, there wasn't even anybody in the league office who actually spoke on the record for an interview for this. They gave me a statement. And the statement was pretty helpful. Their statement was essentially that they recognize that agents are what they call essential stakeholders of the process. And as they are of the hiring process, and as they are trying to improve the hiring process, they are wanting to, broaden, they want teams to basically broaden the influences that are on them when they're in the hiring process. So they were like, we look forward to working with all the stakeholders involved to creating a better process. But what they really mean by that statement is, for several years, they have a lot of efforts, and I'm sure the NBA is similar, where they're trying to fix the hiring process and make it more fair and equitable to all people of all backgrounds. And it's something they've really put a lot of work into with the Rooney Rule, where teams are required to have in-person interviews with 2 external minority candidates for general manager and head coaching positions that become open. And then it's also, they require that now for offensive coordinator and I believe for quarterback coach as well, because that's sort of the pipeline to head coach. And they started recognizing we're pretty diverse on the defensive side of the ball, but not the offensive side of the ball. Like, how can we attack this? And so the league has done a lot trying to make the hiring processes better and slower. Like, that's one of their initiatives too, is just today, today is a very important day in the NFL calendar. Today is the day that teams with open head coaching positions or general manager positions can interview candidates in person that are employed by another NFL club. So the Lions lost on Saturday. So the Bears this week are going to have to be doing a lot of in-person interviews with people they're interested in, such as Ben Johnson, who they could only interview virtually before. So today is a big day. But the reason that it's today is because the NFL was this is happening way too fast. People are interviewing, you know, just a few candidates and then they're hiring right away. And it's not giving everybody a fair shot. And it's not giving coaches who are employed by successful teams who are going late into the playoffs a fair shot either. But I say all that to say that this is part of a larger initiative that the NFL has been really trying to do to improve the hiring process. So 2 years ago at the Combine in 2023 in Indianapolis, the NFL gathered like six coaching agents, you know, the top coaching agents in their mind, and 2 of whom were minority coaching agents as well. And that was important for them to be in the room because the conversation was going to be about how do we make the hiring process more fair and make sure that minority candidates are getting a fair shake. And in that meeting, it was a closed door session. It was Roger Goodell, the league's DEI staff, and then 6 top coaching agents. And these guys don't normally get into the same room with each other. There's like, I wouldn't say there's animosity, but they're all competitors and they often have to have like their, you know, like disputes over clients resolved by lawyers. So, you know, if one coach is like, I'm going to be represented by another agent, then that agent takes the other one to court and whatever. So there's a lot of contentious relationships going on. So it was very unique for the league to get all these guys in the same room. And when they did that, Goodell specifically asked them, how many minority clients do each of you represent? And he already knew the answer because the league had already been tracking that data. And because they're interested in figuring out, the league hasn't, I wouldn't say the league is taking a stance of like, agents aren't doing enough for minorities, or like, because there's agent connections, minorities aren't getting a fair shake. Like, no one at the league office would like come out and like say that explicitly, but they're showing that they're concerned in a lot of ways because they have this meeting where they're asking the agents about that specifically. And they're also asking about package deals. And that was part of the conversation that came up where, you know, let's talk about how an agent can represent a head coach and a general manager with the same team. And the GM hired the head coach, or the coach gets hired and then they hire coordinators that are from their same agency. Like, let's talk about that. And it was more in that meeting, it was brought up of more, is this a problem? Instead of being like, this is a problem. It was like, let's talk about it. How is it impacting minorities? And the 2 minority agents in the meeting, sources who were in the room told me that they were pretty vocal about it being a disadvantage to their clients who are minorities. And then a couple sources at the meeting told me that like other agents were questioning if it was even real. They were like, I don't know if packaging even actually is a thing that's happening. So that was an experience I had, oh my God, over and over again in reporting this where, you know, people didn't want to talk to me. People didn't want to explain their process. And I got gaslit a lot of like people responding and being like, I don't do anything. I just introduce my clients to each other. And that actually might be all that's going on. But it's part of this whole system where it's not a very sophisticated system. I had somebody tell me that for this story of like, it's $1 billion business, but the hiring process is not sophisticated. So owners don't know who to hire. So owners need advisors to tell them, here are the people that you should be interviewing. And then it just so happens that all these agency relationships, they introduce their clients to each other, they hire each other, all this goes on. And it's not like anything necessarily bad or illegal or nefarious is going on. It's just how this all works.
There's a lot that you said that I want to talk about, but I want to start with what you said where some people denying that the packaging happens and gaslighting you. And I think that's hilarious because if there's nothing wrong with it, why would people avoid even acknowledging that it happens? By way of example, I used to work in the NBA front office, and the team I worked for, our head coach was our general manager. His agent represented him, the associate head coach, and then 1, 2, 3 more assistants, and also the assistant general manager. And so it was like, and I didn't see anything untoward about that, and everybody knew it wasn't a secret. And sure enough, when the associate head coach got a head coaching job somewhere else, the agent brings in, he's like, oh, I got just the guy for you guys. And
right.
We're like, all right. And so it happens a lot. And in sports, I think it's driven by the number one thing I think that everybody wants. People people look at it as a negative, but I see the positive side of it is they want to hire people that they can trust. Who are the people you trust? People I've worked with and people I know. Okay, that's level one. Level two is, all right, so there's nobody that I know directly that's available. Level two is someone who knows someone I know that I trust.
They're in the circle of trust. Yeah.
The circle of trust, right? So the idea is like, I don't know Kaylin, but Tom knows Kaylin. He swears by her. So by the transitive properties, I'm going to hire you now based on that. And then if you work out great, I get to say to Tom, I hired your guy, your person. And if you don't work, and if Tom, by the way, gets to say back to me, no. I helped you when you needed someone. I gave you one of the best. So that's kind of how all of these systems tend to move.
But your team was good.
My team was good.
What team was it?
It was the Phoenix Suns.
Nice. Okay.
They were really good back in the 2000s. I know you're an NBA super fan, but 7 seconds or less, there was books written about them, and they were awesome.
Cool.
And so the thing that perverses the process now, and more so now, and certainly from the sound of your NFL piece, is that instead of Ryan Poles picking up the phone and calling someone that he knows in football, say, okay, I'm looking for a head coach, or I'm looking for a coordinator, and then getting the reference that way, he's getting the reference from his agent. And whether that's directly the agent saying, you need to hire my guy so-and-so, or indirectly, as you pointed out in your article, where they get together at like retreats and then they make friends, and it's like, oh, that's my friend from summer camp. I'm going to bring him in.
Right. Well, the other thing I was going to say earlier too is like the NFL, there's not actually a ton that they can do to like step in. Like Goodell, like they've shown that they're concerned because they're tracking agency representation. And when they put out literature, they put out like literature to clubs that's basically a guide of things that they should do and take into account when they have an open position.
That blew my mind.
Which includes write a job description. Was literally so funny.
That might have been my favorite part of your entire piece.
Yeah, but it's like, that means that wasn't happening before.
Keelan, this is the wild part. We say it's $1 billion company, and the name of the document is a inclusive best practices guidebook. But as I'm reading what the best practices for inclusive DEI, basically diversity inclusion, this is just how you hire a person.
Yeah.
Right. It's very straightforward. Yeah. It's not rocket science in that guide for sure. But in that guide, they literally are like, think about who your stakeholders are, like broaden your sphere of stakeholders. And then they say something like, be especially aware of where your recommendations are coming from, particularly when it comes to coaching agents and media. And media is definitely should be in there. Like the reporters are very all tied up in this too, just in the same way that agents are. And like, I'm not an insider, so I don't have to break news. I don't normally break news. Like sometimes I'll have a little tidbit here and there that's like related to something, but that's not like what I spend my day doing is like chasing. I don't spend my day trying to break who the Bears are going to hire.
Right.
So I'm not having that same influence that other reporters might have, especially reporters who put out lists of candidates. But the one thing I was going to bring up too is that, so there's not a lot that the NFL can do other than hand out this literature and like set deadlines of like, you can't interview someone in person until this day. There's not a ton that they can do because they don't actually certify coaching agents. The union certifies player agents, but the players union certifies the player agents. So like the players union is able to regulate player agents. I can't just decide I'm going to be a player agent because I'm not certified. There's an exam. There's all these things you have to do. I think you have to pay dues. I'm not sure, but there's a governing body there that's like keeping track of you. But for coaching agents, coaches don't have a union. So, and neither do general managers in the NFL. So like there is no oversight of how coaching agents operate. So there's really not a lot the NFL can do. The NFL can't say, oh, you actually can't hire a GM and a head coach that are represented by the same agency because we think it's a conflict of interest. They can't do that as it is now because they don't have that. They don't have the leg to stand on to control that in any way. So that's where it becomes difficult and why it's sort of kind of grown, why agents have gotten the influence that they have is there's really no way that the league can oversee it because there's a similar version of this happening in Hollywood. That was really an interesting comparison. in the last, and I didn't even go into this in the story because it was too long. And my editor was like, we're going to lose people if we go into this. So we ended up cutting the paragraph that I had about this. But the last like actor strike that happened, a lot of it was centered around this packaging, which actually seemed way more coordinated in Hollywood than it is in the NFL. Because I mean, I did not uncover any sort of like discount that owners were getting if they hired a GM and a head coach from the same agency. But that's what was going on in Hollywood, is that these, talent agencies would be selling an entire cast for a production to a production studio and being like, oh, we can have everybody for this price. And then, directors were like losing control over who gets casted into a series. And then I think there was a stat that like something like almost 90% of shows from 2018 were packaged in that way, like TV shows. So that seemed very coordinated, and like they were actually able to negotiate that because they have a union. As part of that last strike, the SAG Guild, or I don't even know if I'm calling it Screen Actors Guild, they were able to actually negotiate to like basically eliminate packaging and package discounts and package deals in Hollywood. That would not be able to happen in the NFL as it stands today because there is no coaching union. That's a whole other thing. I've actually covered that before. Like there's kind of underground coaching unions, but they're not like official. So anyways, there's no really like way to like prevent it in the NFL. And the other thing I was going to say is that owners, there's maybe not necessarily something wrong with like hiring someone that you've worked with before. That often functions pretty well because you're like, I've worked with this guy. I know I like working with him. I know we get along well. That's sometimes like a good way, to hire someone. But owners, the root issue here and why agents have become so influential, one of the reasons is because NFL owners often just don't really know what they want when they go into a hiring search. And like I interviewed a head coach in this story who said he had a former head coach and he had interviewed for like 10 head coaching positions, at least 10. So he's met with 10 different owners. He's been in those conversations with ownership. And he said only one of the 10 owners that he'd interviewed with actually gave him a list of what he wanted in a candidate and was like, I want an offensive coordinator. Here's why, la, 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 la. And then walked him through all these things that he think can derail someone from becoming a good head coach. And it was the Eagles owner, Jeffrey Lurie. And that was the only one. And that's a franchise that has been very successful. And that was the only one. So agents, Rod Graves, who runs the Fritz Pollard Alliance, which is an organization that tries to help the NFL to increase diversity hiring. Rod Graves, who was a general manager himself, he told me that he thinks agents are just filling the void of that information void where owners aren't sure who the candidates are. And so again, they're not doing anything nefarious necessarily. They're just like being that trusted advisor. They're being that person that owners need to get information from. And then there's also like a third party here that's not an agent, but is a former general manager. Right now, the New York Jets are using Mike Tannenbaum and Rick Spielman, who are former general managers themselves, including Mike Tannenbaum was the Jets' former general manager, and they've now hired him to lead their hiring search.
So good.
Which doesn't make any sense, but that's for another conversation. Anyways, so owners will often say, because it would be weird if an owner was like, oh, actually, I'm having Jimmy Sexton advised my entire coaching search. Like that would raise a lot of red flags. So instead they're like, I'm going to get Rick Spielman, or in the case of the Bears, I'm going to get Bill Polian. In their 2022 search, they used Bill Polian, who was a general manager, very successful general manager. He's in his 80s now. In 2022, he was on their search committee. So a lot of their people they were interviewing came from his list of who he thought was good. And he does a lot of research to put his list together, but it's his list. So the owner is relying on Bill Polian's list. And I had a front office executive for another team tell me that he thinks that can really limit your process too, because if you're relying on a former GM who has not, been actively involved in running a team in several years, like how current are their recommendations? And you're still getting one guy's, like, it's still his circle. How big is his circle? And so this current front office executive was like, I think that's limiting as well.
Kalen, do you think that because you're not an insider, because you are not in that inner circle of reporting and scooping and all that, that you were able to write this story from an objective, like 30,000 foot view?
Yeah.
You're able to write this story in ways that other people might be conflicted about pulling back the curtain on this story.
Definitely, because I also don't have anything to lose from writing it, because I'm not going to lose sleep at night if coaching agents stop returning my phone calls, like I really don't care. I like talking to them. I mean, they're interesting people, but it's not going to prevent me from doing my job if I never get one of them to pick up the phone ever again. So, whereas if you are an insider, the nature of your job is that if those people stop talking to you, you're in a bad spot.
You're up Schitt's Creek.
It's not going to be good because you're not going to get the information that you need to get to do your job. But because that's not my job, I could see it for what it is. And actually it was funny because after the story came out, I got a lot of texts from scouts, personnel, executives, coaches, people that I know in the business, other agents, a lot of other agents, actually, player agents, some coaching agents as well. But a lot of people just text me being like, wow, thank God someone finally wrote about that. Because they all know that it's going on.
I love sports because there'll be some sort of internal pandemic that's happening, and then someone will say it out loud, and then everyone will behind the scenes pat you on the back like, great job, finally someone, but they won't ever further the conversation themselves other than doing it in clandestine ways.
Well, I will say that there were a lot of people that, because obviously I got this story idea from somewhere. And I think I got it I did a story about nepotism 3 years ago, nepotism hiring. And I was basically just counting everybody who was literally related to each other in football at the time. And it was way more people than I thought it would be. And I even missed people in my account because obviously it was just me going through coaching rosters. Anyways, so I did that story. And in the conversations for that story, when I was talking to people about how, family relationships impact hiring, which the NFL also is completely unsophisticated on too, and they have no control over it as well. And there's only 2 NFL clubs that actually have anti-nepotism hiring policies. The rest either don't have one or won't say if they have one or not. But
well, yeah,
only Arizona and Atlanta have policies that say you can't hire someone related to you.
Did they say why they enacted those policies? Were there any specific reasons?
I don't remember there being a specific reason for those 2 clubs. No, but I know that Bruce Arians, and when he worked in Arizona, he wanted to hire his son, I believe, because his son worked for him with the Buccaneers, and I think maybe previously at a previous stop. So that's something he'd done before, and he wasn't actually able to do that in Arizona because of their policy.
Because Michael Bidwell worked his way up from the gutter. The idea of nepotism should never exist in his organization whatsoever.
Right. Yeah, totally. So but it is interesting because you're right. They're all family owned. I mean, most of them, not all of them.
Many of them, yeah.
Most of them originated as family owned businesses where the kids are inheriting the business. So it is sort of counterintuitive for them for any of them to have an anti-nepotism policy because of the way that the organizations are run for the most part.
Yeah, we know Jerry Jones won't because of his landman speech.
Landman, yeah.
He put it front and center that he is pro-nepotism.
I'm not saying I've done anything right, but I made my mind up a long time ago I was going to work with my kids. And so when I got to Cowboys, I got it so that we could all work together.
Yeah, you got to work with your kids, right? That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And some of the most successful coaches in the NFL are Nepo babies, like Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan are both lifers. It sometimes works with the owners, though. It can be not as good.
Well, Kalen, if I may ask Amin to do the whole Detroit Phoenix connection in this Bradley Beal situation, if Kalen has any thoughts about this one.
You'll get a kick out of this. All right. So there's a player in the NBA. His name is Bradley Beal.
I do know who that is. Yeah.
He's one of 2 players that has a no trade clause. It's very rare in our sport to have a no trade clause. It's just the way it's written. The CBA is written. It makes it hard. So he's one of those guys. His agent is a guy named Mark Bartelstein. It's a big agency called Priority Sports. It's one of the big agencies in basketball. Mark Bartelstein's son is called Josh Bartelstein. Josh Bartelstein is the CEO of the Phoenix Suns now. the team that has Bradley Beal. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Josh Bartelstein's last job was in Detroit, working for the Detroit Pistons, where he ended up as an assistant general manager, but he started as a chief of staff for the president of the team, who is Arn Tellem. Arn Tellem used to be one of the biggest, most powerful NBA player agents, and Arn Tellem once was Mark Bartelstein's mentor in this business.
Yeah.
Rival / mentor, right? Oh, by the way, Arn Tellem has a son. His son's name is Matt Tellem. Used to work for the Pistons, but now he's assistant general manager. I'll give you 3 guesses which team he's an assistant general manager for.
Bradley's team.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Priority Sports is a pretty big player in the NFL too. They have players, and they have only one NFL coaching agent, Rick Smith, but Rick Smith right now represents Ben Johnson, who may or may not be. Bears fans are convinced that Ben Johnson is headed to Chicago on a private plane right now, but I don't know if that's true or not.
But does he have the same agent as Ryan Poles?
No. So if I had to predict who the Bears will hire, there is a candidate, Bill's offensive coordinator, who does have the same agent as Ryan Poles. So I'm like, and it's Trace Armstrong, who is the former Bears player who we've been talking about, who's a player agent. So to me, I'm like, that's the most logical hire. But also Kevin Warren, the Bears team president. Also, Joe Brady appears to be a very good offensive coordinator. So that's the thing here that Anthony, you just brought up, is sometimes if your dad's a coach, that means you became a good coach because you learned from your dad, and you're actually a very good coach. And sometimes if, for example, Bob Lamont, who's the grandfather of NFL coaching agents, I believe he's 80 years old, and he basically started this whole thing of I want my clients to work together. And he started by representing coaches, and then he started representing team presidents into general managers, and he sort of shaped this entire business. And the Chiefs right now, he has 2 clubs where he represents the head coach and general manager: New York Giants, who are not successful, not having success, and then the Kansas City Chiefs, who obviously are a dynasty and going for a 3-peat. So, we'll see if they win on Sunday, but they've had a ton of success, and he represents their head coach, their general manager, and their defensive coordinator. So sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not the hire that you should make, but it definitely is limiting your view of other qualified candidates who may be just as good in the position, but are represented by somebody else. And of the 5, there's 5 NFL clubs this season, or the 2024 season, who went into the season with a head coach and general manager represented by the same agent or agency. And the Chiefs are the only one with a win to finish the year with a winning record and to be a successful team.
Yeah, it was the Jaguars, the Bengals, right?
Well, no, so there was all different ways you can slice it, but head coach and GM was Arizona, and they might be successful. Too early to tell there. They could end up, that could be a good partnership. Arizona, the Bears, which Matt Eberflus was fired, so that one didn't work. The Giants, who I'm amazed that they kept their jobs. The Chiefs, that are successful. And then Cleveland, that has not been successful. Although, that might not be on them. That could be on
the owner's fault.
The owner trading for Deshaun Watson. But anyway, so, and then, there's other ways you can slice it too, because the way that the NFL tracks this is they call it supervisory roles. It's either your general manager, your head coach, or your 3 coordinators. That's what they have identified as a supervisory role. And so the league tracks it based off of how many clubs have more than one person in a supervisory role represented by the same agent, or so they do that, and then they see also the same agency, because a lot of these bigger agencies like Athletes First and CAA, those are probably the 2 biggest ones, because Bob Lamont has his own, he works alone. So he would be the person representing all of his people, whereas Athletes First has, I don't even know how many coaching agents they have because they wouldn't tell me. I'm I know the ones who I know, but there's also they represent a lot of college coaches. So they have guys who are representing college coaches that I don't even necessarily know about.
Oh, now there's the real.
And so does CAA.
That's the CAA game plan.
They don't even have staff. You go to their website, there's nothing. They don't even have a list of agents. There's no information.
No staff directory.
That's what's amazing about this. I mean, go ahead. I feel like you've been cooking up something over there.
Oh, no. So I have 3 different, wildly different tangents. One is a short tangent. We don't even talk about about it, but I knew Mike Tannenbaum. I was thinking about Mike Tannenbaum. He worked for Priority Sports. After he left the Jets, he worked as an agent representing coaches and GMs for a little bit. Then he went to, I think, ESPN.
Yeah.
But I had two wildly different conversations. And I'll let you pick which one we can go down. One of them is on this note about CAA and what is the reputation of CAA within the NFL media, NFL fans, or whatever, because it has a very specific reputation on the NBA side. The other wildly different tangent is you tweeted, inspired by the pattern of agent representation with Chicago's recent hires, I asked questions about NFL coaching agents, how they do their jobs. Reporting this was harder than reporting on an extreme religious group, which you also did. You also reported on an extreme religious group 4 years ago for Sports Illustrated. Well, you know what? The hell with the CAA question.
The CAA answer is not that interesting. They're just a huge agency. Like, I think like in college football, Sexton has more of a reputation of like leveraging relationships in college football. But in the NFL, it's like Jimmy Sexton's the lead CAA agent. I mean, everyone knows who he is. Like he's a big player. He was at that combine meeting. Like they are a major player in this. So I don't know that there's necessarily like, more of a reputation for them other than like at one point he had Jets head coach, Jets general manager, and the quarterback that they drafted in the first round, Sam Darnold. So like, I don't know how that's not a conflict of interest, but like, he's not the only agent to ever do that, but like they're getting into where they're representing everybody. And it's like, what?
That's how they get around it. They get around it. I say, we're a huge agency. Our player division is completely different from our coaching and front office division. But then you end up with a team like the New York Knicks where legitimately your president, your general manager, your assistant general manager, your best player, your second best player, your third best, like they were all CAA clients.
Your coach, your assistant coach, who happens to be the father of your star player. Like if you want to really unpack the CAA connections in the NBA, just look at the New York Knicks, who are, by the way, one of the best teams in the NBA.
A fun fact, that's actually the only thing I know about the NBA because one of my best friends from college, her sister is married to Jalen Brunson.
Wow!
And rep by CAA.
Third eye open. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
He actually wasn't at her wedding. I was super bummed. So I don't think I've ever met him. But I was in her wedding. So I know her sister. I know Jalen's wife, Allie, very well.
That's crazy.
But I don't know Jalen personally because he was, I think my friend got married in October. So he was like starting the season.
He was working, yeah.
Yeah, he was busy. I was like, okay, I guess that's fine.
All right, let's get to, this was harder to report on than an extreme religious group.
Yes, it definitely was because I was just like gaslit so much in the process. When I was reporting on this extreme religious group that people in it would describe as a cult, the people who left it were like so willing to talk. They're like, oh my gosh, I want to talk to you about it because I want other people to know about it. I want people to like, know how this thing works. And even people who were in it, like even the former NFL players that were the impetus of me reporting on it at all, even they talked to me. Like they were like, yeah, we'd love to like tell you about what we believe now, like I'm super proud of it. Like, but with this, and yes, it was hard. There was a lot of difficult challenges in that reporting too. But with this, it was like, it was very unexpected to me. Cause I'm like, when you go into reporting on an extreme religious group, you're expecting like it to be hard. You're expecting there to be a lot of emotion. You're expecting to get yelled at. You're expecting to get hung up on because it's like a very sensitive topic. And that certainly did happen in that scenario. But in this scenario, I was like, okay, people have been telling me to do reporting on this for several years now. I'm finally going to do it because the Bears it became a talking point on local sports radio here where, one of the stations had a few segments about Trace Armstrong being like, did you guys know that he represents all these people? And like, what's really going on here? Like, is he the shadow team president?
He's the shadow power broker. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'd already had it on my story ideas list as soon as they had hired their most recent offensive coordinator, who was who struggled so much that they fired him by like week 10. Once they fired him, I was like, all right, I've got to do this story because like it's clear they're going to be hiring again. It's the perfect time to do this story and like let's expand it to include the entire NFL, but like let's center it around the Bears. So When I started making calls about it, I really just was not anticipating that this was going to be like such a thing that people did not want to talk about. But the agents, not all of the agents I talked to, because I did get 2 coaching agents on the record in this story, which is cool. Jason Fletcher and Kennard McGuire, and they're both independent. They both have their own agencies. They do not work with any other agents. And they're both, I will also say, they were both at that combine meeting, and they're both minority agents. So they had very, they recognize packaging as a problem. And one of them, Kennard, has represented a GM and a head coach in the same place before as well. So like, it's not like he's never been in that position. He's experienced that. It was with the Raiders, I believe, Hugh Jackson and Reggie McKenzie. But it was his scenario was a little bit different. But both of these guys were basically like, no, we want to say on the record that we think that this is an issue and that it needs to be called out. But like, they're the only ones who are willing to say it.
Yeah, here are the quotes from Fletcher. He was describing, or at least in your reporting, describing the horseshoe-shaped long table that these agents were sitting in. There's 3 agencies, CAA, Athletes First, and Pro Sports Representation. According to the NFL data, or according to ESPN's data about the NFL, front offices represented 20 head coaches and 20 general managers. And Fletcher, as he's describing this on the record to you, said, we are all in very powerful positions. If I represent an individual and he gets a GM job, I don't want to force a narrative of, hey, he should be with his head coach. And then he says, the fix is in. I think that a lot of guys, I'm not pointing fingers, I think there's a strong energy where if this person gets a GM job, he is going to hire someone from that same brand. That happens a lot in this business. Literally saying the fix is in. I think that's what fans, we just watched the Chiefs win on some controversial referee calls. I think fans want to believe that the fix is in, and here you have an agent saying the fix is in on the hiring process, the business of the NFL. And that's a pretty bold statement, and one that I think a lot of agents are probably like, yeah, I'm glad he said it. We all get it.
Yeah. So I'm really glad that I got him on the record and another one on the record, because otherwise I was just like, oh my God, I'm going insane, because no one wanted to like say anything on the record. Yeah, exactly. And like, agents just don't want you to know how the business works because it doesn't benefit them in any way. Like, they've been operating without us knowing what happens behind the scenes, and like, they'd prefer to continue it being that way. And so I was really surprised. Yeah, I was just surprised by the reaction of, oh, I'm getting texts that they've hired Ben Johnson, the Bears, right now.
Oh. Breaking news.
Wow. I didn't just break that. I think Schefter broke it. So I'm reading like a Schefter tweet.
You broke it to us.
Yeah. Oh my God, wild. Maybe he was on that plane. Sorry, very distracted. But yeah, I just had so many people in this process be like, why do you think this is a story? This isn't a story. All we do is introduce our clients to each other and then we get out of the way. And like, and so I really like, the reason it was harder than reporting on a religious group is that people were making me question whether it was actually a story or not, which is a unique experience. I've never felt like I'm so turned around, like after a conversation with someone and I'm like, no, the league is tracking this. Like, the league office cares. That's why it's a story. And it was just like beating my head against a wall. So that was very difficult.
One of the great quotes also, you got it from a podcast that had interviewed Trace Armstrong.
Oh yeah. Thank God I listened to that.
And he said, we're all robbing the same train. I was so taken aback. Again, it's not that he's saying anything I didn't already know.
Right.
But the bluntness of saying it like that.
I thought that was the kicker to the story. I was like, oh, there's the story. The story just ended there.
Yeah.
That's a great finisher.
Yeah, it could have been.
We're all robbing the same train.
I found that because I've started to do this where I type the person's name into the podcast app just to see if they've done an interview, because I knew Trace wasn't going to talk to me because, obviously I tried to talk to him and it became very clear he was not going to answer any questions for this. So I was like, all right, well, let's see if he's like talked about the way he does business anywhere else. And it turned out he had done I think that was there were 2 that I listened to. One was a Dolphins podcast because he played for the Dolphins. And then one was a University of Florida podcast because he had played for the Gators. And he said that in response to, it was just a question about how athletes first, similar to like you pointing out the agency connections with the Knicks, like Athletes First represents a ton of players. They're one of the agencies in the NFL. They also have a giant coaching division and they represent front office executives. So they represent every type of individual that's represented in the NFL. And so I think that the host was just like, oh yeah, you're still helping the players out. And he was like, yeah, we're all robbing the same train, which is the owner, you know? So like, I mean, some agents don't see it as a conflict of interest at all. And I never asked Trace if he ever saw anything as a conflict of interest because he didn't want to speak to me for the story. But there are agents I talked to that think that the NFLPA should do something about players and general managers being represented by the same agents, because that relationship in particular, I think, might be the most potential for conflict of interest there. Because if you have a general manager and agent who represents players, like, well, that agent's going to try to get players on. Obviously, you guys know, I feel like this is probably way more prevalent in the NBA than it is in the NFL because there's so many players on an NFL team that, okay, fine. If he has like 3 guys that he signed that are part of Athletes First, like who cares? Because there's 50 other players. But like on an NBA team, I think that could be even more of an influence because you've got way less players. But I think that's something that some coaching agents that I talked to were like, the league should do something about, the PA should do something about that. And they could, but they haven't.
Kaylin, I want to go back to something you mentioned about how it became a talking point on local sports radio in Chicago about, wait a second, this Trace Armstrong represents all these guys and has represented past guys, and people started asking questions. Do you think if Trace hadn't been a former Bear, would have been as glaring to the general public in sports talk radio? If his name was Jack Armstrong, right, and he was just a career lawyer, would they have picked up on it as quickly as they did because he's a former Bear?
I don't think so. I think the fact that he played for the Bears and he's not like one of their most famous players, but he was known. I mean, he played after the Super Bowl team. So I think if he'd been on that 85 team, it would have been like, oh my God. But like, he was drafted in 89. So he was like at the very end of Mike Ditka's tenure as Bears coach. But I do think that's part of the reason why it became such a thing, because if you're just an agent who didn't have a playing relationship with a club, that relationship is going to be like less obvious. And then when you see, oh, it's Trace, he played for the Bears. Oh, and he's now represented the last 2 head coaches. The GM that he represented then hired one of his clients to be the head coach just 2 days after he got the job. And the guy that he hired, Matt Eberflus at the time, he had interviewed with the Jaguars, but he was not like the hot candidate. Like he wasn't like the name. And he was a first-time head coach as well. And I think a lot of strategies would say, well, if you're a first-time GM, maybe you want to hire a veteran head coach. Like you often, there are first-time pairings, like that. But I think people might thought he was going to go with a veteran coach, and the 2 other finalists were both veteran head coaches. So that hire was a little surprising. And so I think all of those things combined, and then when they hired Shane Waldron as offensive coordinator last offseason, that one also, and they interviewed, I think, 9 candidates for that and interviewed Shane, and all of the other candidates kind of made more sense than Shane Waldron did, especially when they knew they were drafting a rookie quarterback. And like, this was going to be the most important hire ever, because he needed to coach this quarterback with the number 1 overall pick, Caleb Williams. So I think all of those things made Bears fans really tune into that and be like, oh, wait a second, this is very strange.
Do you think if you did a study on whether this works, you would say it doesn't? Like the whole packaging, because I did a story about nepotism on the players' side on the NBA, is that second generation NBA players vastly outperform their draft slot, which is a surprise. Most people think, oh, his last name is, or it's Scottie Pippen Jr. He's going to get an easy, fast track to the NBA. He's got it so easy. But so many players routinely come into the league at a certain draft slot, and then they outperform that draft slot when they get into the league. They're much better than what the GMs thought. And so there is, some notion that maybe we're being too harsh on the Nepo NBA players, that actually these guys, Arvydas Sabonis, son of Stephen Curry, son of Del Curry, Devin Booker.
Bronny
Bronny, yes. We're too hard on Bronny.
She does know Bronny.
I know who Bronny is.
All these players are sons of NBA players, and more often than not, they do better than expected. So with the Chiefs, you kind of have like, all right, well, if it works for the Chiefs, it must work for everybody, but that's certainly not the case. So on the level, like if you were to do a study, is your suspicion that like GM coach package deals from an agency, from the same agency, good or bad?
I think the study, based off of literally this year's sample size of 2024 and how we already went through like who won games and who didn't, and it was just one team that like had a winning record and was a successful team. I think the data would probably lean towards bad. However, I do think it's dependent on, because there can be ways into this that are natural and work. Because, for example, if you like using the Chiefs as an example, and I don't actually know for sure if this is how it worked out, but like a lot of times if you're at a club and that head coach has an agent, you get introduced to that coach's agent because you're already working with that coach.
Chicken or the egg thing.
And then it's really kind of organic that way because you're like, oh, I already work well with this guy. He already had this agent, but then I met this agent through him. And then later we're going to work together again somewhere else. And like, it's not so much that the agent is what brought them together. They were already together. And then he hired the agent because he knew about him through this other guy and whatever. And so I do think there's like ways into this that work better than others because, you know, one of the things with like Trace and the people in Chicago, you know, didn't work is like first time head coach, first time GM. And like they hadn't worked together before and they really didn't know each other that well. I think they had met at one of the summits and it's just like, what was the relationship there other than the shared agent? There was someone who was recommending Eberflus to Poles and Chris Ballard, who's the Colts general manager, but the two had not actually spent, you know, they hadn't worked together before in that way. And Poles didn't interview enough people to even know. He interviewed 3 head coaches. That was it. So how is he really going to know if Matt Eberflus was like truly the best head coach fit for him? So I think there's probably certain ways that you can get into this that make it function better than others. So I do think it's hard to come down and be like, it's always bad. And, you know, like this is a very nuanced, very, very nuanced story. And I think that's why people were gaslighting me because they didn't understand that like, I'm not coming out and saying like, this is what's dooming hiring. It's like, no, this is something that's going on. Let's see why it's going on. Let's see how it's going on. Let's see what the league office thinks about it. And like, let's just learn about it because we haven't before.
The interesting thing to answer your question, Tom, is the difference is when it comes to players, at the end of the day, there is a very objective evaluation process. When you go, you play, either you can play or you can't play. We find out real quick who can play, who can't play. Whereas it's a lot less clear. And I want to quote, Kaylin, your piece.
Yes, thank you.
You had a quote from one coaching agent who said, believe me, we're not in the building every day. We don't know really how good or bad our guys really are. They all talk a good game, but we don't know.
That was my favorite line in this thing. I meant to bring that up earlier, so I'm glad you brought that up because it's literally like, it's hard to tell if a coach is good other than win-loss. And if it's a position coach, you're looking at, are their players performing well? I think it's actually kind of a little bit easier sometimes to like look at a position coach's impact on the game, I think, because it's a very specific group of players. But for an agent, they're not in the building. Like he said, they're not in the building. They don't know. They're going to advocate for their client regardless of what's actually going on inside the building because they think that they represent good people and they're going to advocate for it. So yeah, I love that quote.
Great story.
Thank you. I think I have to go to a round table now about Ben Johnson. So since that just happened.
It's amazing.